Philip would have me play a few Thelonious tunes, and so I'd like to do that. Before I do, I have to say that there was a period of my life, blissfully, before the septet began, where I got a chance to meet Thelonious Monk. And immediately upon doing so, I fastened myself to him like a mollusk that had found its rock. I had the great good fortune of running into the Baroness Pannonica, who was more or less his physical keeper at this time in the mid-70s. Monk had retired from active playing and was living at the Baroness's posh pad, I'd say, in Weehawken, New Jersey. He, in a full suit of clothes, would pass all day thinking, lying in a day room which gave off the Baroness's studio, or solarium actually, which featured the Hudson River right outside and New York skyline right beyond that. It was Pannonica's demented, I think, notion that I, possibly, if I were brought in to play for Thelonious, that it might cause him to come out of his day room, perhaps in an irascible mood, but at least to come out and say, "No, no, no, Forrester, not like that, like this." Well, he never did do that. In fact, since it stops time for me, I'll never forget my very first session with Thelonious. I was playing his tune Introspection, I would say, and in my own way, and suddenly the door slammed. And my thoughts in that way were just basic garden variety existentialism gone rotten. I certainly didn't feel much desire to play the music of Thelonious Monk, nor to play jazz, nor to play piano, nor really even to continue living. And yet, here I was playing this superb Steinway. I noticed that while I was thinking these things, my fingers were still moving. Beyond me was the Hudson River, and beyond that, the New York skyline, and I thought to myself incorrectly, well, I'll never be here again, so I might as well just continue. And I did. And what I got into was odd. I got into a half-conceived tune that I had been sort of dreaming about the night before, and I'd never really worked out its implications, but playing this superb piano, I started really getting into it and composed it on the spot. And in the throes of that, then I guess I really sort of missed it when Monk's door crept slowly open. It was maybe in the middle of my second session with Monk, about a month later, that I realized what would positively cause him to close the door. If I played one of his tunes, he wasn't interested in that. If I attempted to impress him with some florid figure I'd devised, he'd slam the door on that. If I repeated myself a bit too often, he'd slam the door on that. But what he was really interested in was my actually trying to work out, as I say, the implications of what I was composing. He could listen to that for hours, or at least he'd leave the door open. As to any real interaction with him, I remember one bizarre afternoon when Barry Harris, who was also in residence in the Nika's pad, had brought in a young phenom from Detroit, a teenager who played sort of after the manner of Art Tatum, but was easily embarrassed. And the three of us had a piano cutting contest in the old way. You know, Barry Harris would play something, I would approximate it, and then the kid would sit down and cut us all, except that after he'd played for a few moments, he would turn as red from embarrassment as a dark-skinned black person can, you know, and his hands would fly up from the keys and he would chuckle. And that would be it. That contest took place over something like 2.5 hours, and my wife Mary was there, and at one point jabbed me in the ribs and said, "We're really here, aren't we?" I said, "Yes, I think so." She said, because it comes on so much like a dream, as it indeed it did. During one of the breaks in that session, Monk offered Mary a cigarette, which Nika proclaimed later was his first outward gesture in 6 months. It's nice to hear about. I would say that I probably played for Monk 6 or 7 times over a year and a half, and those were always the conditions. His moods are famously various, and sometimes he had no use for me, I think, as a human being or as a musician. Sometimes he embraced just what I did. And the most encouraging word he ever gave me, I suppose, verbally, was telling me that I could play.